A long, long time ago, in a quiet village tucked deep inside the thick forests of what we now call Western Nigeria, there was a place called Odell. It wasn't the biggest village or the richest, but the people were proud. They farmed the land, hunted the forest, raised children, and lived with deep respect for the gods and the spirits that watched over them. Now, among these people, there was one name everybody knew: Obafemi. This wasn't just any man. No, Obafemi was a legend. A tall, broad-shouldered hunter with a chest like a drum and eyes as sharp as a hawk's. He was quiet, rarely seen in the village. Most times, he disappeared into the forest for weeks. But when he came back, he came back with animals so big it didn't look possible one man could carry them. He'd stroll into the village barefoot, blood on his hands, carrying antelopes, boars, sometimes even two at once like it was nothing. He didn't sell the meat. No, he shared it. He fed the old. He fed the children. And every time the people cheered, sang his name, and danced like it was a festival. That's how much they loved him. But one year, something strange started happening. People began disappearing on the way to their farms, especially children and the elderly. At first, the villagers thought it was kidnappers from rival towns, but soon they found claw marks, giant paw prints, and bits of torn cloth soaked in blood. It didn't take long before everyone started whispering the same thing. A leopard. But this wasn't a normal leopard. No one saw it clearly. And no matter how many young men formed search parties, or how many traps were set, nothing worked. The beast was smart, and it was angry. Farmers stopped going to their lands. Mothers held their children tighter. Fear covered Odell like a wet cloth. And guess what? Obafemi wasn't in the village. He had gone deep into the forest on one of his longer trips. Maybe 2 moons passed no word. The people waited. Some said he had died. Others said he'd run off to another village. But deep down, everyone hoped he would come back. And then one hot afternoon, as the sun was high and the air felt heavy, the silence of the day was broken by a scream. Then another, and another. People ran toward the edge of the village, heart pounding, not sure what they were going to find. Old Okoro, the village palm wine tapper, was the last to arrive. But what he saw made his mouth hang open like a broken gate. There was Obafemi standing tall and calm, walking slowly back into the village. And on his right shoulder, the lifeless body of the leopard. Its jaws hung open. Blood trailed behind him. Flies had already started to circle. Obafemi didn't say a word. He just walked steady, proud, while the entire village exploded in celebration. People danced. They clapped. They shouted. Obafemi? Obafemi the Fearless? Women threw wrappers in the air. Children ran after him like he was a spirit from the skies. Drummers grabbed their drums. The sound of celebration echoed from one end of the village to the other. That evening, the village gathered in Obafemi's late father's compound. There, under the setting sun, he skinned the beast with careful hands. The meat was cut into chunks. Women boiled 7 large pots of soup. Young girls peeled yams. Young men pounded them into soft white mounds in giant mortars. There was music, dancing. Wine flowed. Even the gods must have heard the joy that night. Meanwhile, far across the village, in a palace carved with precious stones, Oba Ogunlana, the king of Odell, was resting in his courtyard when he heard the noise. "Guards!" he called out, lifting his head. "Has the sun fallen out of the sky? What's with all this shouting?" One of his guards, sweating from running, dropped to the ground in a deep bow. "My king, Obafemi has returned. And he has killed the leopard." The king sat up straighter, brows raised. Obafemi again." Just then, his only daughter, Princess Temilad, came rushing in. Her wrapper dragging, excitement written all over her face. "Papa!" she cried, kneeling quick. "He did it! Obafemi killed that wicked leopard. With his bare hands, I'm sure of it." The king chuckled, looking at her sideways. "You speak of him too much these days. You sound like one of those maidens in the market who swoon whenever he walks by." Temilade rolled her eyes but blushed. "It's not like that, Papa. I'm just happy he's back. That's all." The king smiled knowingly. "Very well. Go and invite him to the palace. A hero deserves more than soup and dancing." As she left to deliver the message, something about the way she walked, the extra bounce in her steps, made the old king shake his head and mutter to himself, trouble is brewing. Now, Obafemi might have been a legend to the people of Odell, but to Princess Temilad, he was something else entirely. That night, after the village feast, when the drums finally rested and the pots of soup were empty, the stars over Odell were brighter than usual. Maybe it was just the firelight, or maybe the gods themselves were watching. Either way, the palace was far from quiet. Inside his grand compound, Oba Ogunlana sat on a low stool, deep in thought. The soft breeze rustled the silk curtains of his chamber. Gold ornaments hung on the walls. Goatskin rugs covered the cold floor beneath his feet. A large clay jar of palm wine sat untouched beside him. He stared into the distance, remembering. Once, when he was young, Odell was nothing but scattered huts and a few weak farms. But he had worked hard. He introduced better farming methods, built storage barns to preserve food during famine, and opened up trade routes that brought cowries, fabrics, and livestock from distant lands. He had only one wife, unlike the other kings who collected wives like trophies. He loved her deeply, but their joy was slow to come. For many years the queen couldn't conceive. They tried everything: prayers, sacrifices, roots, herbs, until finally, after a long wait, she became pregnant. Oba Ogunlana was overjoyed, but fate had other plans. The queen died during childbirth, leaving him a daughter, his only child, and a broken heart. He named her Temilad, meaning, "Mine is the crown." And truly, she was the jewel of the palace. Beautiful, intelligent, brave, but also stubborn. As she grew older, suitors came from far and wide. Princes, warriors, traders, all wanted her hand. But Temilad refused them all. "I am not a goat to be handed to the highest bidder," she told her father once, with fire in her eyes. "I will choose love, not duty." The king never forced her, but the pressure from the elders grew louder. "Your Majesty," they said, "you know a woman cannot sit on the throne. If she will not marry, who will continue your bloodline?" Oba Ogunlana nodded but stayed silent. His heart said one thing, tradition said another. And now, here came Obafemi, marching into the palace like thunder in the dry season. When he arrived the next day, the gods let him in with wide smiles. The king welcomed him warmly, standing to shake his hand, a rare gesture. "Obafemi?" the king said, smiling. "The leopard slayer, the forest nightmare. Odell owes you again." Obafemi bowed slightly. "I only did what had to be done, my king." They sat, and after some light banter, Oba Ogunlana leaned forward. "I want to offer you something, a position. Come live in the palace. Become the head of the royal guard. Your days of wandering the forests can end." You'll have food, servants, comfort. But Obafemi shook his head. I thank you, Kabiyesi. Truly. But my place is not in this palace. My home is in the wild, among the trees. I'm not made for gold and gossip. There was a pause. Even the birds outside seemed to go quiet. The king nodded slowly, respecting his choice, even if he didn't understand it. Very well, but at least accept these gifts. He clapped twice, and servants entered with bolts of cloth, calabashes of fine wine, and a small pouch of precious stones. Obafemi accepted with grace and bowed again. But as he turned to leave, someone appeared beside him. Soft footsteps. A faint scent of hibiscus. Timolade. She fell into step beside him, smiling like the moon. You really prefer trees over a throne? She asked, teasing. Obafemi gave her a side glance, but said nothing. You always run from the village. What are you running from, great hunter? She continued, half laughing, half serious. Or who? Obafemi stopped and turned to her, his face cold now. I don't like people asking too many questions, he said, voice low. Tamerlane blinked, then smiled again, unbothered. That's fine. You don't have to answer now. Then, without warning, she leaned in and whispered, I'm going to marry you one day. Obafemi stepped back slightly, eyes narrowing, but she just turned and walked back to the palace, hips swaying, head held high. And though he didn't say it out loud, something about her words stayed with him longer than he expected. Even the monkey, still snickering, paused. The other animals stared, mouths open. She was unforgettable. Eshu, still in monkey form, smirked. Oh yes, this will be fun. And with that, Era, the human bear, stepped into the world of men, her heart full of courage, and a mission that would change everything. As the first rays of morning light broke through the forest canopy, the clearing beneath the weeping willow began to shimmer softly, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Where once there was a large aging bear, there now stood a young woman, barefoot on the forest floor. She looked around slowly, still adjusting to her new body. Her arms were soft and slender, her fingers curious and twitchy. Her legs, though firm and strong, felt light, unsteady even, like a newborn calf learning how to walk. But it was her backside that truly caught attention, round, full, and impossibly generous. It swayed with every small movement, as if it had its own mind. Even Eshu, in his monkey form, raised an eyebrow. He muttered. Sango didn't hold back with that one. The animals stared in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like her. But Era, for that, was now her name, paid them no mind. She was focused. The mission had begun. She glanced down at her hands again, then at her flat stomach. For the first time in her life, she felt empty. Hunger. She touched her throat. It felt dry, scratchy, thirst. She blinked slowly. The forest that once welcomed her now seemed strange, noisier, wider, rougher, and most frightening of all, she could now feel heat, cold, pain. The bear that once lumbered through these woods without care was now human, and humans, she was learning fast, were fragile. She took a step, wobbling slightly, then another. Her hips moved in a wide rhythm, her backside shifting beneath the thin animal hide she'd wrapped around her. Birds flew from their perches, startled by her presence. A few squirrels peeked down, confused by this curvy stranger walking like she didn't belong. She tried to hunt the old way. A rabbit darted past. An instinct kicked in. She crouched low, then pounced. Too slow. She barely landed on her feet, scraping her elbow on a rock. She hissed in pain, more shocked than hurt. She had never felt pain like this. As a bear, she could break tree trunks. Now, a fall could break her. She tried again at a stream this time. Fish danced in the water, mocking her. She reached in fast, like she used to. But the fish were faster. Slimy, slippery, impossible. Her belly growled loud and long. She sat on a nearby rock, panting. Sweat clung to her back. The sun was high now, and it felt hotter than ever. She peeled off the animal skin from her shoulders and wiped her face, her large hips sinking deep into the rock. Still, no food, no water, no success. As the hours passed, her body grew weaker. Her head felt heavy, her lips cracked, her stomach twisted like angry vines. Even the trees began to blur. She stumbled through a thicket, tripping on a root, falling hard onto the ground. She lay there, arms splayed out, breathing slow and heavy. And that's when she began to cry. The forest once her friend, her kingdom now mocked her. Every leaf, every branch, every rustle seemed to whisper, "You're not one of us anymore." Then, just as the light began to dim and dusk rolled in, a shadow fell over her face. She opened her eyes weakly, and there he was, Obafemi, standing tall and still, with a sharp spear strapped to his back, and a rabbit dangling from his left hand. His broad chest rose and fell slowly, eyes narrowed. His jaw was tight. At first, he didn't say anything. He just looked down at her, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. A half-conscious, curvy young woman lying in the middle of nowhere, with skin dusted by the road and lips dry from the sun. She tried to rise, panic flickering in her eyes, but her limbs betrayed her. She could barely move. Obafemi stepped closer. She flinched. With one hand, he grabbed her wrist gently at first, then firmer, and as soon as he touched her, her world faded to black. She had fainted. When Ira woke up again, the sky was dark. Stars blinked above like tiny gods watching. A small fire crackled nearby, and she was wrapped in thick animal skin, lying beside a tree. She turned her head weakly and saw Obafemi crouched by the fire, slowly turning the rabbit over an open flame. The smell nearly drove her mad. She groaned softly. He turned immediately. "Ah, you're awake." His voice was deep and calm, but there was something behind it, something curious. "You almost gave up out there," he said, breaking off a piece of the roasted meat. "Here, eat. You'll feel better." She reached for the meat slowly, her hands trembling. He watched her carefully. "You must be hungry. Where are you from? Why are you out here alone in this forest?" She blinked, chewing, trying to understand his words. They made sense, but not fully. Still, she felt safe. There was a softness in his eyes she hadn't expected. "Don't worry," he said, handing her a carved wooden cup filled with sweet, cold palm wine. "You'll be all right. We'll talk in the morning. Rest now." As she leaned back, full and warm for the first time in days, Ira looked at him. The hunter she had been sent to stopped and whispered softly to herself, "This will be harder than I thought." When the first light of dawn peeked through the trees, a gentle warmth settled over the forest floor. Birds chirped lazily, leaves swayed softly, and beside a dying fire, Ira slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she sat up or tried to. Her body still ached. Her legs were stiff, her arms weak. But the hunger had eased, and something else had filled the space where fear used to live. Warmth, safety. Obafemi was no longer crouched by the fire. She looked around quickly, heart racing. But before panic could return, She heard footsteps, soft, steady, confident. He stepped out from behind a tree, holding 2 fresh yams in one hand and a bundle of herbs in the other. His spear was strapped to his back again. His bare chest glistened slightly with morning sweat. His jaw was firm, his eyes sharp. But when he saw her awake, he smiled gently. "You're stronger today," he said, crouching down by the fire. "That's good." She blinked, staring at him, trying to catch the meaning behind his words. She didn't understand every word, but she caught the tone, not threatening, not cruel, calm, kind. He added wood to the fire and began to roast the yams. Then he tore some leaves, crushed them with water, and stirred them into a paste, all while talking gently, as if he wasn't sure how much she understood. "Strange place to find someone like you. The forest isn't safe for lone women, especially ones as..." He paused, eyeing her backside subtly. "Noticeable as you." Ira looked away shyly, tugging the animal's skin over her hips, which shifted as she sat. She didn't mean to draw attention, but her figure was impossible to hide. Her hips were wide, her thighs full, and her backside round and heavy, so full it bent the very shape of how she sat. Obafemi noticed. Of course he did. But he didn't say anything more. Instead, he handed her a warm chunk of roasted yam. She took it with both hands and nodded slightly in thanks. After a few bites, she pointed to her chest. "Era," she said softly. Obafemi's brow lifted. "Era?" She nodded. He smiled. "I'm Obafemi." She smiled faintly, repeating it slowly. "Oh, but Femi." He laughed. "Close enough." They sat in silence for a while, eating slowly. The breeze danced through the trees. The fire crackled. Every now and then their eyes met quickly, awkwardly, then darted away. There was tension, but not the dangerous kind. It was something new. Era looked around and tried to gesture. She pointed to the forest, made running motions with her fingers, then placed her hand on her chest. Obafemi watched, trying to follow. "You ran away from somewhere?" he asked. She shook her head, frustrated. Then she tried again, this time mimicking a claw, then holding her stomach, then collapsing dramatically to one side. Obafemi chuckled. "Ah, you were attacked." "No." "You were weak, hungry." She pointed at him, nodding quickly. "Yes." He smiled, then poured her a fresh calabash of water and placed it beside her. She drank gratefully, eyes closed as the coolness hit her throat. Obafemi studied her carefully. Everything about her was unusual, from her sudden appearance to her curves to the way she moved. There was grace, but also confusion, like she was still learning how to live in her own body. He found himself drawn to her. And it wasn't just the way her hips swayed when she shifted, or how her full backside bounced gently as she walked. It was something else, something soft, curious, vulnerable. Era, on the other hand, was trying to stay focused. She was supposed to be convincing him, warning him about the forest and its pain. But instead, here she was, drinking his water, eating his food, warming herself by his fire. The same man she was sent to reason with, or stop. But how do you reason with someone who hasn't even hurt you yet? That night, as they prepared to sleep again beside the fire, Obafemi tore some fresh leaves and created a small mat for her to lie on. "I'll take you back to the village in the morning," he said. "There's a man there, the chief priest. He knows many tongues. Maybe he can help you speak freely." She tilted her head. "You don't understand me," he said, tapping his chest. "But that's all right. Sleep. Tomorrow, we walk." As he lay down on the other side of the fire, Era curled up under her blanket. She watched him from the corner of her eye. His breathing slowed. His chest rose and fell. She reached for a stick nearby. She could do it now. Strike him. End it. But her fingers froze. He had fed her, protected her, called her beautiful without saying the words. Could she really do this? She sighed and dropped the stick. Maybe tomorrow. By the time the morning sun touched the treetops, Obafemi was already awake, packing dried meat into a leather pouch and sharpening his short knife on a flat stone. The birds were chirping lazily. The fire had long died out, and the forest air was fresh with dew. Era stirred beneath her blanket of animal skin, her thick body shifting slowly. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, her wild hair falling over her shoulders. Her hips rolled lazily as she stretched, and Obafemi turned slightly, just enough not to be caught staring, but not enough to miss the view. Her backside, Lord, it was something else. Full, heavy. The way it moved when she walked was enough to make any man forget the direction he was headed. Even the trees seemed to bend when she passed. Obafemi had seen many women in his life. But Era? She looked like she was carved from the heart of the earth itself. But this wasn't just about beauty anymore. There was something in the way she looked at him, the way she smiled softly after taking a sip of water, the way her eyes lit up when he handed her a roasted nut she'd never tasted before. She was learning, changing, becoming more human by the minute. Obafemi stood and motioned toward the path. "Come," he said. "We go to Odell today. You need help. Real help." Era looked up, confused at first, then slowly stood, balancing herself. He offered her a hand. She took it. He grinned. "You need a name. I can't keep calling you girl from the forest." He placed a hand on his chest. "Obafemi," he repeated. Then he pointed to her. She blinked. He muttered. "You said Era, yes?" She nodded, smiling. "Then that's what I'll call you." He looked at her for a moment longer, then turned and began walking. "Come on, Era. We have a long way to go." And so they walked side by side through the narrow bush path that led toward the edge of Odell. Along the way, Obafemi pointed out trees, animals, strange-shaped rocks. He talked like a teacher, and Era listened like a student, nodding and smiling, sometimes repeating words with that soft, careful tone of hers. They stopped under a cola tree to eat. He handed her palm kernels and bits of dried meat. She shared a few berries she had picked on the way. He laughed when she tossed one into her mouth and made a face. "Too sour?" She stuck her tongue out and fanned her face, and they both burst into laughter. For a moment, it didn't feel like a mission or a journey. It felt like something else. That night, they made camp again. The fire crackled gently, casting soft orange light on their faces. Obafemi lay on one side, arms behind his head, staring at the stars. Era sat nearby, hugging her knees. And somewhere inside her chest, a war was brewing. She had a mission. She was supposed to convince him to stop hunting. The forest was dying. The animals were desperate. And yet here she was, laughing at his jokes and eating his food. Every time she looked at him, the memory of the angry tiger, the grieving lion, and Sango's deep voice echoed in her mind. But there was one problem. She still didn't have metal rods. Sango had said they'd need to strike them together to wake him once the mission was complete. But Era didn't even know what a metal rod was. No one in the forest did. She had searched their surroundings quietly while Obafemi hunted and gathered. She had turned over stones, poked at strange objects. even pressed 2 wooden sticks together just to try. Nothing worked. Without the rods, she couldn't wake Sango. And without waking Sango, the mission couldn't end. But each passing day was making the mission harder. She glanced at Obafemi across the fire. His eyes were closed. He looked peaceful, strong, like someone who had carried pain but still found reasons to smile. She remembered the way he held her wrist gently when she fainted, the way he handed her food without expecting anything in return, the way his eyes softened every time she laughed. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't cruel. He was human, complicated, but kind. And that terrified her more than anything. Because what if she failed to change him? Or worse, what if she succeeded, but couldn't bear to leave? She lay down slowly on her mat of leaves and animal skin, her large backside sinking into the ground as she pulled the blanket over herself. She stared into the night sky, the stars swimming quietly above her. Tomorrow, she whispered to herself in the language of the forest. Tomorrow, I'll try again. But she didn't say what she meant by try. Stop him? Find the rods? Or maybe tell him the truth? Even she wasn't sure anymore. By the time Obafemi and Era reached the edge of Odell, the sun was just beginning to rise. The village was already waking. Smoke curled from cooking huts. Women carried firewood on their heads, and children chased goats across the dusty paths. Era stood still for a moment, eyes wide, taking it all in. It was her first time in a human village, and everything, the smell, the colors, the noise, felt like magic. She stayed close to Obafemi, her big hips swaying as she walked behind him, her backside attracting more than a few second glances from passers-by. Even the women looked twice, whispering behind their wrappers. Who is she? Where did Obafemi find her? She looks different. Obafemi ignored them. He led her straight to the palace. Now, Oba Ogunlana had fallen gravely ill just days before. No one knew why. 1 minute, he was sitting in the courtyard laughing with his council of elders, and the next, he collapsed, sweating and shaking. The palace was tense. The chief priest tried everything: prayers, incense, incantations. Nothing worked. When Obafemi arrived with Era by his side, the guards stepped forward to block her. Who is this woman? One asked. She cannot enter the palace. She's with me, Obafemi said firmly. Step aside. Inside, the king lay on a mat, pale and barely breathing. His body shook with fever, and his lips were cracked and dry. Temelad sat by his side, tears in her eyes. She looked up and saw Obafemi, and her eyes narrowed when she saw Era. But before she could speak, Era stepped forward, sniffed the air, then dropped to her knees beside the king. She touched his wrist, then his forehead, then reached into the small pouch tied to her waist. Obafemi blinked. What are you? But she had already crushed some dry leaves, added a splash of warm water from a nearby bowl, and began rubbing it gently across the king's chest. The scent of herbs filled the room, bitter, strong, earthy. The chief priest raised a brow. What is she doing? She knows herbs, Obafemi said. Better than anyone I've ever met. Era didn't speak. She just worked. She crushed more leaves, boiled them quickly over a small flame, and poured the liquid into a calabash. Then gently, she lifted the king's head and helped him drink. At first, nothing happened. Then, the king coughed. Once, twice. Then his eyes fluttered open. He whispered, voice weak. What happened? The room exploded. The chief priest gasped. The guards stared in disbelief. Even Temilad looked shaken. Obafemi knelt beside the king. You were sick, Kabiesi, but Era helped you. She saved you. The king blinked slowly, then turned his eyes to Era. She knelt quietly, head bowed, hands still stained with herbs. You, he murmured. You are not from here. Era looked up, and for a moment their eyes locked. No, she's not, Obafemi said. But she's with me. Temilade stood quickly. Papa, we don't know who she is. She could be... The king raised a hand, silencing her. Whatever she is, he said slowly, she has saved my life. And for that, she is welcome in this palace, in this village, and in my family. The next day, a celebration was announced. The king ordered drums to be played, dancers to perform, and food to be prepared in every corner of Odell. The villagers gathered, eager to see the mysterious woman who healed the king. When Era stepped out, wrapped in fine cloth gifted by the palace, the crowd gasped. Her curves were even more defined under the soft fabric. Her backside moved like it carried the rhythm of the gods themselves. Children pointed. Men stared. Women whispered, some in envy, some in awe. Obafemi stood beside her, proud and steady. The king raised his staff. Today, I give honor to the one who saved my life, and I bless the union of Obafemi and Era. May their love bring peace to our land. The villagers cheered. Palm wine flowed like river water. Drums thundered. The air was filled with song and laughter. And as Era danced gently, shyly, the people saw more than just beauty. They saw wisdom, grace, and healing. Women came to ask her about herbs. Children brought her flowers. Even the chief priest nodded respectfully as he passed her. She was no longer just a strange girl from the forest. She was Era of Odell. But deep inside her heart, something still stirred. Something she hadn't told Obafemi. Something no one in the village knew. She was still on a mission. And she still hadn't found the metal rods. Not everyone in Odell was happy about the wedding bells and praise songs that now followed Era everywhere she went. Behind the palace walls, in a private chamber filled with silk curtains and the scent of burning incense, Princess Temilade sat alone, staring into the distance, her face stiff, her jaw tight. Every drumbeat outside felt like an insult. Every cheer for Era the healer felt like a slap. She had tried for years to win Obafemi's attention. She'd waited, flirted, smiled, whispered. And now, out of nowhere, some thick-hipped woman from the forest walks in, saves the king once, and suddenly she's everyone's favorite. Temilade gritted her teeth and clenched her fists. She's not even from here, she muttered to herself. She's not royal, she's not noble, and I know she's hiding something. Later that evening, during a quiet dinner in the palace courtyard, Temilade tried to speak up. Father, she said calmly, we should be careful. We know nothing about this girl. She appeared from the forest. No family, no tribe, no background. And suddenly she knows herbs better than our chief priest. The king sipped his wine, clearly unbothered. Many great healers come from the forest. That knowledge doesn't belong to palaces. But what if she's using witchcraft? Temilade pushed. What if she cursed you and only removed the curse so we'd trust her? Oba Ogunlana raised a brow. You're reaching, Temi, and I'm too old for baseless fear. Even the elders sitting nearby shook their heads. She healed you. She saved you. Accept it, one said. Temilade stood, frustrated. You're all blind. She stormed away, leaving her father and the elders in awkward silence. From that moment on, her heart darkened. She stopped attending public events. She avoided Era. She barely ate, and behind her closed doors, something began to twist inside her, not just jealousy, but something darker. Hunger for power. Because even though she had always said she didn't want to be forced into marriage, that didn't mean she didn't want the throne. One evening, while pacing in her chamber, she heard a knock at her back door. It was faint, 3 soft taps. She opened it slowly. A tall man in a dark cloak stood in the shadows. "Princess Temelade," he said, voice smooth like oil. "I bring greetings from the kingdom of Adunto." She blinked. "What do you want?" "Not me," he said, smiling. "But my king, your uncle. King Adirami believes the time has come for Odell to have a true ruler. Someone born of royal blood. Someone who won't be ignored." She hesitated. "We have warriors ready," he continued. "A quiet invasion. No bloodshed, just a shift of power. But we need your help from the inside." Temelade's heart pounded. "If we do this," she asked, "what happens to my father?" "That depends," the man said casually. "We can make it look like sickness, or an accident. But either way, the throne becomes yours." She stared at him, torn. Then a whisper came from behind her. "You were always meant to rule." She turned sharply. Standing in the corner, where no one had been a second ago, was an old woman, hunched and wrapped in faded cloth, her eyes glowing faintly. "Who are you?" Temelad asked. The woman smiled. "A seer, a voice, a messenger. You are not meant to be second to a forest girl. You are meant to be queen." And just like that, the woman vanished. The cloaked man didn't react. He simply waited. Temelad nodded slowly, breath shaking. "Tell your king, I'll help." What she didn't know was that old woman wasn't a woman at all. It was Eshu, the trickster god, in one of his many disguises, smiling behind invisible lips, planting chaos like seeds in dry soil. He floated through the palace air, laughing silently to himself, because the game had finally begun. Odell had known peace for many years, but peace is like a sleeping lion, gentle only until it wakes. The morning began like any other. Roosters crowed, smoke floated from breakfast fires. Children chased each other between huts. But inside the palace, something was off. The king had risen early to walk through the courtyard, as he often did when the air was cool. A single guard followed behind him, yawning lazily. Then, without warning, the guard lunged. A flash of metal, a loud shout. The king barely dodged in time, falling to the ground as the blade grazed his arm. Another guard tackled the attacker before the knife could strike again, and in seconds the courtyard was flooded with noise. "Assassin! Protect the king!" Obafemi came sprinting through the gates, spear in hand. When he reached the scene, the attacker had been pinned, beaten, and dragged to his knees. But something felt strange. This wasn't a wild ambush. This was planned, calculated, and Obafemi could smell betrayal. As the guards questioned the would-be killer, he refused to speak, until someone mentioned Princess Temelad's name. Then he smiled, and Obafemi's stomach turned. By midday, the truth began to spill out. Temelad had been plotting with King Adirami of Adunto, her mother's brother, a bitter rival of Odell, long jealous of its wealth and power. She had promised them access to the palace through secret tunnels, a slow poisoning of the king, and support from select palace guards. But her plan had failed. The assassin acted too early. And now, war was coming. By evening, the scouts returned with news. An army was already marching toward Odell. Obafemi wasted no time. He gathered the strongest hunters and warriors. They sharpened blades, strung bows, dug trenches, and set traps along the forest paths. Era, though not trained for war, stepped into action. She prepared herbs for healing, strength roots for the soldiers, smoke powders to confuse enemies. Her hands moved fast, her mind sharper than ever. She taught the women how to make fire bombs from dried palm fruits and oils. She even laid a circle of protective charms around the palace walls. And though she didn't say it aloud, deep in her heart she whispered, "Sango, I may not have the rods, but let this count for something." When the enemy came just before dawn, they came like a flood. Adunto's warriors wore red cloth and painted their faces. They stormed the edge of Odell with loud battle cries, spears flying, swords raised high. But Obafemi met them with fire. He fought like a man possessed, leaping, spinning, blocking, striking. He moved through the battlefield like a storm, his spear finding its mark every time. At one point, 3 enemy soldiers surrounded him. He dropped low, swung his blade in a wide arc, and all 3 fell like trees. From the palace rooftop, Era lit her smoke powder and tossed it into the air. Boom! A thick cloud of black mist rolled down the slope, blinding the enemy. Archers from Odell took their chance arrows flew like rain. War drums thundered. Steel clashed. Blood was spilled. But slowly, Odell held its ground. Then, as the battle turned, the enemy captain was dragged from the forest, beaten, bruised, begging. And who was standing beside him, bound in ropes, eyes wild? Princess Tamilade. The villagers gasped as she was marched through the square. Some shouted. Others simply stared, shaking their heads in disbelief. The king, now fully recovered, stepped forward. His robe was torn, but his voice was clear. "Temilade, my own blood." "Why?" She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her face was stained with tears and shame. Obafemi stood by the king's side, silent. Era stood a few paces behind, her hands still stained with ash and herbs. "You were blinded by pride," the king said, voice shaking. "You let bitterness eat your soul. You turned against your people, and against me." Temilade fell to her knees. "I only wanted to be seen," she whispered. "I only wanted to matter." The king closed his eyes for a long moment. Then he spoke again. "You will not be killed, but you will not live as a princess either. From today, your name is erased from royal scrolls. You are no longer of this house." The villagers gasped. A few women wept. Some nodded solemnly. Temilade was dragged away, barefoot, her royal beads stripped from her hair. As she was led out of the palace gate, she turned back one last time, her eyes finding Era, who stood quietly beside Obafemi. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not hatred, not anger, just the heavy silence of what could have been. The drums of war had quieted. The fires were out. The warriors had returned home. And Odell, battered but unbroken, began to heal. Villagers patched roofs, swept streets, and rebuilt the marketplace. Children laughed again. Songs returned to the air. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, women gathered under trees to tell the story of the healer from the forest. The thick-hipped stranger who saved a kingdom and won the heart of its fiercest hunter, Era. She sat quietly outside her hut now. Obafemi's hut peeling cassava with the village girls who had once whispered about her. The same girls now watched her every move with admiration. They asked her about herbs. They asked her about courage. And some even asked her how she walked so gracefully with hips so wide and heavy. Era would only smile. But inside her heart, a quiet storm still swirled, because deep down, She knew the truth. She never completed her mission. She hadn't found the metal rods. She hadn't struck them together. She hadn't returned to the weeping willow, to wake Sango. The mission by the gods' definition was incomplete. But Era had found something else. Purpose. Love. A home. She had come to stop Obafemi, to change his ways. And maybe, just maybe, she had. He still hunted, yes, but differently now. He no longer chased for sport or fame. He protected the village. He trained the young ones. He taught balance that the forest gave and must be respected. That animals were not enemies, but neighbors. One morning, as they walked hand in hand through the forest, the same forest where they first met Obafemi paused. He looked at her and said, "Do you know something strange?" Era tilted her head. He smiled. "I don't dream like I used to. I used to dream of killing beasts. Now, I dream of growing old beside you." Era felt her chest tighten. She looked up at the trees, the sun peeking through the leaves, the path ahead soft with fallen petals. "I never told you this," she whispered. "But I came here with a task. I was sent to stop you." Obafemi raised a brow. "From hunting?" She nodded slowly. He said nothing, just looked at her, his eyes soft, his voice calm. "And did you?" She smiled faintly. "I think we stopped each other." They walked on, in silence, their fingers still locked. And high above, hidden among the treetops, the animals watched. The lion, the tiger, the eagle. Even the old bear's distant cousins, all hidden, all silent. They had not been forgotten, and they had not forgotten. But they did not come to attack. They came to witness. To see the man who once hunted without mercy now walk softly through the land. And the woman who once growled with claws and teeth now laugh with joy, her great body swaying peacefully beside him. And somewhere no one saw, from where a voice echoed, as if on the wind, "Isn't it beautiful?" it said. Era turned quickly, eyes scanning. Then, from behind a thick tree, a familiar figure stepped forward. It was a man now, tall, smiling. His hair was braided with tiny bones, and his robes shimmered with every color of the rainbow. His face was playful, his eyes bright with secrets. "Eshu." "You," Era said, stepping back. Obafemi reached for his knife instinctively, but Eshu raised both hands. "Relax," he grinned. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Not today." "What do you want?" Era asked, suspicious. Eshu chuckled. "Just to say, well done." He walked slowly towards them, hands behind his back. "You were never meant to succeed, you know," he said, laughing. "Not really. Sango never cared about missions. He's been asleep since before Odell was even founded." Era frowned. "Then why?" "Because I was bored," Eshu said, shrugging. "The animals were crying, the gods were snoring, the humans were dancing. I needed entertainment." Obafemi stepped forward. "You used her." "I nudged her," Eshu corrected. "Just like I nudged you. And look, a beautiful ending. The hunter is no longer feared. The bear has become beloved. The forest and village walk together. Peace, balance, a story." He turned, stepping back into the shadows. "But don't worry," he said over his shoulder. "I'll be watching. After all, who knows what happens next?" And just like that, he was gone. No smoke, no noise, just vanished. Obafemi and Era stood there, stunned, but only for a moment. Then he touched her shoulder. "Come," he said gently. "Let's keep walking." And so they did. Together. Not as hunter and prey. Not as human and beast. But as equals. As partners. As a story still being written.